Okay, let's try that again. There we go. I can hear myself a little bit. Maybe just turn my speaker all the way off. Okay. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regularly scheduled CPIC meeting. Great to see everyone here this evening and online. And we'll get right underway with our agenda. Sorry, my screen was just doing some gymnastics there. Okay, and if we could start, please, with the land acknowledgement and our opening prayer. Do we have Father Pratt with us? Is he online? Okay. All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Easter prayer. Good and gracious God, our most glorious Creator, as we greet the signs in nature around us, of spring once again regaling us in the bloom, in the songs of returning birds and fields soon to be planted. We give you praise for an even greater sign of new life, the resurrection of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, that we especially celebrate at this time. The sadness and despair of his death has given way to the bright promise of immortality. For the resurrection is our guarantee that justice will triumph over treason, light will overcome darkness, and love will conquer death. As we celebrate, we also dare to ask for your grace that we may live the promise given to us. By imitating the life of Jesus and reaching out to the poor, the marginalized, and the least among us. As we strive to be a neighbor to all those we meet, we ask for your special blessings each and every day in our Halton Catholic school communities and families. Working with them, we strive to make these communities our beacons of hope and justice for peace, so indeed to love one another. We praise you in this Easter season. Change our lives, change our hearts to be messengers of Easter joy and hope. We make our prayer through Jesus Christ, our risen Lord, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Honoring the land and territory. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations in the Métis. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Attawandaron, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis. These lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, our Catholic social teachings call us in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions: lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walk before us. All these wonderful elements of creation exist, gifted to us by our Creator God. We'd like to welcome and thank the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation of being stewards of this traditional territory.
Thank you, Vince, for stepping in there. Okay, we'll move right along to our agenda and minutes. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review in advance. Any changes necessary for the agenda? Okay, if not, if I could have someone make a motion to accept the agenda. Thank you, Janelle. All right, and a seconder. All right, thanks, Kevin. Okay, and the minutes from our February 13th meeting. Any changes, additions from anybody? Okay, if I could have someone move to accept. Jen, thank you. And Chair seconder, thank you. All right, so moved. All right, back to Nancy for our board update.
Thanks, Jerry. Good evening, everyone. For our board update for this evening, we're thankful for all the work that's being done in our Catholic schools together with our Catholic school councils and our parent community. There's been so many wonderful things taking place over the last few months. If you follow through Twitter, you can see so much happening, and I appreciate that CPIC is actually highlighting things and sending it out. It's important that parents see all the different things that are happening in our schools, and we're thankful for all the work that our parents are doing to engage in some of the work that's happening in schools. Our school climate survey is available to parents for our grade 4 to 8 students and our students in grade 9 to 12. So there's an opportunity for us to get feedback from the community and really give us some further data that we can then plan and implement things within our schools. April 24th is the PA Day, which will focus on for the staff development, where schools will focus on their school improvement and equity planning for their specific school. And the staff will have an opportunity to complete the school climate survey so we can get the staff perspective. We're beginning to look at staffing for September 2023. Enrollment in the elementary panel is down. We've been sort of declining over the last few years. Hopefully, now that we're post-COVID, we'll start to see that enrollment come back to us. We're still not sure of what's caused the numbers to go down, but because of it, staffing will be lower than it is for this year. Okay. Secondary has also done some decline. So our schools will be staffed and we have enough staff to staff our schools, but there will be some adjustment in our staffing. Under the pillar of belonging, many of the elementary schools are welcoming our new kindergarten parents to their schools throughout April, May, and this is for the new parent orientation session for planning for September. We shared at the March board meeting our student census data. That's the survey that was done last spring. Tomorrow night, Director Klein is going to be sharing a list of some actionable things that are actually taking place in the board right now and will be taking place over the next few months to ensure that our students continue to feel safe and welcome in our school community. Many of our schools are involved in many activities that embraces a lot of the students and their diverse needs within our school. We have our many art festivals, be it's either music or drama, or just even displaying some of the visual arts things that they're doing. We have our spring sports activities, soccer, baseball, track and field, lacrosse, Special Olympics, all planning over the next 2 months. Under the pillar believing, our Catholic Education Week is from April 30th to May 5th. All of our local parishes will be communicating this to their parish communities, and schools have planned a variety of activities to welcome parents into the school throughout that week. The events vary from school to school, and so that's where you'll see the difference, okay? So it's something that each school does and will communicate to their community. Our annual Journey with Jesus will take place on Thursday, May 4th at the school level, and each school community will embrace the journey in their own unique way, which will be led by the school faith animator or the chaplain. All of our grade 7 classes have received the sacrament of confirmation, and our grade 2 students will begin to receive their first communion beginning this weekend. Some of the parishes are doing this as a class, and some are doing it through their regular weekend mass. So again, it depends on your parishes, how they approach communion or confirmation. It's up to the parish priest. Throughout the month of May, the parishes will be setting up meetings with the school to plan for the dates of liturgies, masses, and sacraments for the 23-24 school year. On May 9th to 11th, the Institute for Catholic Education will be holding the symposium in Toronto, where a team of representatives from our Catholic school board, from all Catholic school boards in the province, will come together to discuss Catholic education. The theme for the symposium is titled On the Way. The purpose of the symposium is out of the Renewing the Promise document, where the Catholic education community is encouraged to support opportunities for faith formation for all members of the community in a way that's inviting, engaging, and purposeful. We'll be sharing our adult faith formation that we're doing in Halton Catholic and reaching out to other boards to learn how they're doing their adult faith formation and how we can expand on it. Our CPIC representatives for the symposium are Jerry and Cherish. So I look forward to being together with them at the symposium, together with Director Klein, Superintendent Narr, administrators, parish priests, and board staff. Under the pillar of achieving, we are at the midpoint of our second semester with midterm reports being sent out later this week. Parents had an opportunity to go in for parent-teacher interviews in the secondary schools just before the Easter break. We were going to be offering a pilot grade 11 English and Indigenous education under the course NBE 3U. And this pilot is going to take place at Holy Trinity next year, Loyola, Notre Dame, and St. Kateri. St. Kateri will also be offering the English Indigenous education. So not just in the NBE 3U, but the 3C and 3E, with the plan that all schools will offer it in the 24-25 school year. Continue to focus with our students where the students are at this year, instructing them with their reading, writing, and mathematics at the elementary level, where there's direct instruction in the classroom based on the needs and how the students are progressing. Our summer school learning programs are open for registration at the elementary and secondary level. The listing is available on the Thomas Merton site, and our special education learning program is a half-day program at Our Lady of Victory in Milton in July. We are also anxiously awaiting the new language curriculum for the Ministry of Education, and we'll be rolling this out in the classrooms in the fall. Additional training will be provided to the teachers for our D-Stream program in grade 9 and 10. And again, we're looking forward to whatever else the ministry is able to provide to us for that. Just this past weekend, we had the High Skills Trade Fair at St. FX. It was well attended by families and students. Representatives from the local trades and colleges were there to provide information to parents and students, and many of our grades 6 to 8 students were there together with their parents, so it wasn't just our high school students. Our STEAM team has been planning many events throughout this winter term and into the spring. We have our first robotics team traveling to a World Championships this week. They left today for Houston, Texas. That's the team from Holy Trinity. Myself and Superintendent Del Sordo had an opportunity together with Marvin to go see them at the First Ontario Center. It was a great event to see the students witness the engagement, collaboration, problem solving by the Loyola team and the Holy Trinity team. As an educator, I said I was inspired just to see the level of what the students were doing completely on their own, from building the robotics to working through the problems and the challenges that they had. And they didn't need any direction from anyone. They truly were a team working together. It's an absolute joy to see the students doing that. And so being that we have a lot of opportunities in our schools where the students, be it robotics, the arts, the sports, whatever, there's a passion for the students, when we provide them opportunities to do that, we can see how learning in the classroom can get expanded. They get to do things that they love. So it's really important to make sure we have all those activities up and running for them. Which leads me to, we need a CPIC representative for our Regional Specialized Programming Committee. So this is through Superintendent Kroll. This is regards to the motion that came out at the October 18th board meeting, where it was directing staff to do the feasibility study on the arts program within HCDSB. And so we had a survey that went out, and then the results were presented at the March 7th board meeting. And so we, as a result, are striking a committee to look at the regionalized programs that could be offered. So we need a representative from CPIC, and the committee will comprise of members. There will be a trustee on the committee, an elementary administrator, secondary, an elementary teacher, a secondary teacher, elected representatives, elementary and secondary, a community rep, and then a CPIC member and a CIAC member. So if there's anyone on CPIC who is interested, please email me. I'll give you until maybe Thursday so that I can let Superintendent Kroll know who will be the representative from CPIC. What he's asked is probably going to be 3 to 4 meeting times for the 23 calendar year. So not just the school year, probably until Christmas, there'd probably be 3 to 4 meetings that you'll be expected to attend. Okay. Andrea, is that timeline good for Jeff Kroll? When did he say he needed it? Wednesday, the 19th? I can say Thursday. Okay, so if you can let me know by Thursday, I'll let him know that. Okay, any questions with regards to the report? And it's just a snapshot because there's so many things that are happening in our schools, so you can't even capture it.
Just a quick question. So you'd mentioned that the enrollment is down in our board. Do we know if it is in the public board as well? I'm wondering if it's a, change in demographic, like in the area that it's not growing as much, or is the public board getting some of the enrollment that we are not?
They are down as well.
They're down as well.
They are down as well. So, and what's greatly impacted is kindergarten. Okay, so kindergarten enrollment, it's like right now, we're over 500 students down, but their enrollment's down too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting. I wonder if it's like parents keeping their kids home or just not registering, or people are having less children in Halton region.
And even that, a lot of the new growth that's happening are the families with children actually moving into or the houses just like being bought, but not actually people living in them.
Right.
So that's what our planning team is actually looking at to get some more data. We do know that some families have chosen to go private, but it's not that we're seeing a decline, that they're going to the public systems instead of coming to us. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I would add too, I think one of the optimistic vantage points we have is the new curriculum that's going to be coming out. And certainly the ministry and this government has put a lot of emphasis on early reading skills, early language skills. So we are hoping that might, reach the ears of parents who have children who are heading into kindergarten and think this is great. We all agree with that. We all agree that COVID was problematic for early reading, and to have the focus on it, new resources, a new focus on assessment, and then where there are gaps, responding to them with great vigor, I think would be something that might attract people to that.
So my question just in terms of students coming back, what's the enrollment like for students after grade 12 returning for another semester or a year? Is it up or is it down?
I'm going to try to answer that question, and I may tap on Superintendent Cordero since he's here, who's got a little bit about the secondary enrollment. Every high school has returning grade 12 students, okay? But the grade 12 students that are coming back, there is a cap on how many courses that they can take when they're coming back, okay? So the goal is a lot of them are coming back for one semester, not necessarily the whole year, okay? I do think there's an uptake in the grade 12s that are coming back. We've seen more grade 12s coming back, but I'm going to maybe, if he's okay with the question, Superintendent Cordero, defer to you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the invitation for the presentation later this evening. So yes, I do. One of my responsibilities is secondary staffing. I can tell you that depending on the school, a smaller school like Assumption or Notre Dame might average about 25 to 30 students returning for their grade 12 year. In larger schools like Bishop Redding, where they have a projected enrollment next year of 2,600 students compared to a Notre Dame, it's 1,050. They get somewhere between 60 and 80 returning students. So there was a decline in returning grade 12 students the previous 3 years during the COVID period. Obviously, a lot of times returning students are engaged in the full life of the school, and though they have a plan for a post-secondary destination, sometimes that also includes participation in athletics and the arts, and maybe that additional year allows them to better, materialize some of their goals and strengths and shine in different ways. So that there was a decline in definitely during the COVID years, but it seems like we're returning to more usual numbers. You're welcome.
Just a follow-up question for Director Klein. You mentioned the literacy program that might be a draw to get parents to register their kindergartens. Just wondering, is the board somehow actively marketing that? I'm not sure that parents know about that.
We are suffering from the disadvantage of not knowing what we'd be marketing, short of a series of very optimistic announcements by the minister over the last few months about this, but the details are wanting. The worry is that, well, the hope, not worry, the hope is that the curriculum would come. First of all, the curriculum itself that's been revised, one that's been revised over many years, takes a long time to revise curricula. And we've been waiting for many years for the language curriculum to be revised. We would hope that that would come like now, if not earlier. The worry is that the last time we had a major revision in elementary curriculum, that was math, and that was 4 years ago. And it was like August when it arrived. So we need that, and we need training for teachers with regard to that. This stems from the right to read report, right? That came out a couple of years ago, looking at the fact that this is an equity issue, and that gaps in early reading are very important, right? Because it's harder and harder to move through those inequities as the years go on. But we're very excited about it. So it would be, the promise is that we would have resources too, that would be resources that would meet the needs of students in terms of language skills, and that teachers would be given the time and opportunity to do that. And the hope would be that there'd be staffing as well to help with that too. So the details though they're coming. We're excited though.
Nancy, you mentioned summer school through Thomas Merton. Is Camp Summerland happening this year? And do we know when potentially registration would happen?
Camp Summerland probably will happen. It's usually a little bit later than the Merton registration. And that's because the school has to identify students who would be a candidate for Camp Summerland. It's the application process. Then the parents have to be notified if they will take the spot, because there's only so many spots, okay, for it. So that's why it's a little bit later than the regular registration. Okay, yeah. If there's no further questions, we're going to go right into a presentation. So tonight we have Superintendent Cordero here, together with Amanda Morrow, who's the Vice Principal of Notre Dame, and Jane Atchison, who's our Chief Social Worker. And they're going to do a presentation to CPIC tonight with regards to the anti-sex trafficking training that all our staff have already received. Okay, so through Superintendent Cordero, which I don't think some CPIC members or some parent may have not been aware of, that we did this training for the past year. And this has been led through Superintendent Cordero. So training that other boards have been receiving, our board has, but maybe it hasn't been communicated out. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Cordero. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Again, to all, thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. I do want to acknowledge the contributions of Amanda Morrow, Vice Principal at Notre Dame, and Jane Atchison, our Chief Social Worker, as well as Patricia Delben, who's our curriculum consultant and works in specifically around religion. And she's done a lot of great work with our office in providing education and training for students in the classroom directly, and to engage parents in various learning opportunities. I also want to thank my administrative assistant, Nikki Piva, who does a lot of the groundwork, some of the logistics behind that, and Kim George, who works in human resources. Kim George assisted us in the development of our training program. So I just wanted to acknowledge them and their efforts. Before we speak to what we're doing in terms of protocol and training, and how we address particular incidents when we're informed of their occurrences, I just wanted to put out a qualifier that sometimes the content on the topic can be emotionally triggering, depending on your personal lived experience. So if at any point in time, if it becomes emotionally anxious for you and you want us to pause, just let us know, and we don't mind that. Or if you need to take a break, step out, we perfectly understand and respect that. We do have a hotline number that I could share with you at the conclusion of this presentation or this evening, if this is something that you want to see counseling or some supports to. Sometimes you just don't know what has happened in our past that might come forward when we're presenting data and information of this nature. Okay, so okay, so let me begin the presentation. So sex trafficking, sometimes it's often confused with human trafficking. So human trafficking encompasses sexual exploitation and forced labor. Sex trafficking is the sexual exploitation element of, do we have that PowerPoint? Okay, so sex trafficking is the sexual exploitation component of the human trafficking umbrella. Sex trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes internationally. And unfortunately, if you look at international data, Ontario specifically, and that's two particular corridors, which I'm going to identify in a moment, is one of the fastest growing hubs of sex trafficking of youth internationally. So maybe if we can go, Andrea, to the third slide. The experience of a youth or a victim, regardless of age, of sex trafficking is always different for different people. Sometimes it's internalized for years, and then the trauma and all of the harm comes out at a much later date in life. Sometimes there's internal struggles that are ongoing, and that individual feels ashamed or feels that somehow they're to blame. And so that the response to sex trafficking and being a victim is very much unique and to each individual. And when we are training staff, when we are educating students, when we are providing supports for youth in our schools who have been victimized, we always ensure that we are active listeners. And Jane will speak more specifically to some of those therapeutic pieces and those active listening action items. But I think it's very important to note that sex trafficking affects people emotionally in different ways. And unfortunately, if you look at the statistics, maybe we can go to the next slide, Andrea, the persons who are often most victimized are those who have historically been marginalized or overly represented in the victimization elements of society. So we're talking about young girls, young women from Indigenous communities, from Black communities, racialized communities, from the 2SL LGBTQIA plus communities. So we're very much cognizant of aware that this affects us in different ways. And there are those from various communities that are more impacted in terms of incidents and the severity of incidents than maybe other particular groups. So if you look at some of the key statistics that we've shared here, 95% of persons with lived experience of police reported human trafficking cases were persons with who have self-identified either as women or as girls. 22% of persons with lived experience of police reported human trafficking cases are children under the age of 18. The vast majority of those youth under the age of 18 are girls between the ages of 12 and 14. So as you will learn in our presentation, that's the age group of grade 7 to grade 10. Now we've got to be very sensitive to students and their age and what they're able to maybe cope with in terms of what is taught in the classroom and what is communicated. So we have over the past year or so, year and a half now, targeted particular age groups that have been historically most impacted or most victimized by instances of uh, sex trafficking, or who are most vulnerable to future incidents of sex trafficking. Most persons with lived experience of human trafficking in Canada are trafficked by someone they know. And unfortunately, I can give you examples in our HCDSB community. Uh, as Nancy pointed out, one of my portfolios is safe and accepting schools. We have had three such incidents in our community as a whole this past year. And I can tell you that two of the three have involved immediate or extended family members as being the persons trafficking these young people. So we are by no means immune as a region from victimization of sex trafficking. Oftentimes you'll find that affluent communities are more popular than others, where sometimes those who are looking to groom or looking to entice young girls in particular come from affluent neighborhoods. You might have heard recent reports in the newspaper, inside Halton and other media outlets of incidents that have occurred in the Oakville, Burlington, some of our hotels and other places of accommodation that unfortunately have hit hard some of our families in Halton region. If you look at slide 5, you will see there's a corridor, two main corridors of sex trafficking that has occurred in Ontario. The first corridor between Windsor, Ontario, along from the Detroit, Canada-US border through to Montreal, and the second corridor, which is less common to people, but very much present in the sex trafficking experience, is that corridor between Sudbury in Northern Ontario and Winnipeg in Manitoba. We go to slide 6. I spoke to you about some of the headlines, and I can tell you that we work consistently with various community partners, whether it be Halton Regional Police Services, and Amanda's going to elaborate more about that in a moment, Savis, or One Child, or other community partners in not only identifying incidents of sex trafficking that are occurring among us, but also obviously addressing this through police authorities and the kinds of supports that we offer in our schools. Who is at risk of trafficking? So looking at slide number 7, I sort of hit on this a little bit earlier. Oftentimes you'll see members of the 2SL LGBTQIA plus community, children and youth in care or transitioning out of care. Oftentimes females, identified folks, especially youth, students who are homeless, marginalized, individuals with a history of physical or sexual abuse, individuals with low self-esteem, low self-confidence, individuals who are isolated, have a lack of community or that friend group, that circle of trust or circle of friends, or lack of sense of belonging. So sex traffickers are very purposeful in reaching out to young girls who present like they are, everything's fine and they're doing well, but things aren't. And oftentimes they don't have a caring adult in their lives. They pretend to be something they're not. And unfortunately, sex traffickers are astute in picking up on the signals of vulnerable youth, and will use, gift giving, opportunity offering, scenarios for youth to entice them into a world that then comes with a particular cost. And then that cost gradually becomes being enticed into the sex trafficking world. If we move to the next slide, as I mentioned before, as educators, we understand that while any student can be impacted by sex trafficking, systemic racism within various social systems, education, child welfare, policing, health, have resulted in specific populations being disproportionately impacted by sex trafficking. We also understand that we have a need to adopt a human rights-based, non-judgmental and trauma-informed approach to raising awareness, preventing and identifying and responding to sex trafficking. In response to this reality and the context that I have shared with you, the Ministry of Education, in work with the Attorney General's Office and the Ministry of Health, directed through PPM, Policy Procedure Memorandum 166, in July of 2021, that all school boards produce a anti-sex trafficking protocol. That protocol was begun in its infancy stage in September of 2021. It involved police services, a number of community partners, the Children's Aid Society, SAVIS. Amanda will speak more specifically about some of those processes. Halton Regional Police Services, and the 4 school boards within Halton Region, the 2 French boards, Catholic and Public, and ourselves and our coterminous partner, HDSB. We met together, we came up with a common protocol, and then after going through all those processes, we ourselves within the HCDSB came up with our own distinct, unique protocol, given our Catholic lens and given the nature and the context of the experience of students and youth and staff within our own school board. So a number of processes were adopted, consultation with families and community partners and so forth. Again, Amanda is going to speak more eloquently about that. And what came of it was in February of 2022, our first HCDSB anti-sex trafficking protocol and all of the measures that were to be put in place as a result of that protocol thereafter. So without further ado, I will pass on the baton, if you can say that in the world of track and field, to Amanda.
Thank you. Could you please go to the next slide? So Anthony touched on a few of the points that I was going to mention, but these were the 4 boards that we collaboratively worked on the protocol with. The ministry set the framework for us and we worked together. We tried to build relationships between the school board, but then take it the next step to make sure that it was grounded in our faith, but also unique to our own Halton Catholic community. It was a really neat experience to have representatives from administration from the different boards, safe schools reps, social worker, equity leads, to have different lenses. You know, we're part of the same communities. The French boards have a little bit larger community than Halton. So it was neat to see what they were doing in their boards and how we could share ideas and develop a protocol that would be unique to Halton Catholic. Next slide, please. The guiding principles that underpinned everything that we did was we wanted to ensure that we fostered student voices. If our students are the ones that are being impacted by sex trafficking, they need to be centered in the protocol development, and we need to hear from them what's going to be impactful in terms of education, what's going to be impactful in terms of prevention. So part of our community consultation involves students from the various school boards as well as our student senate. So we had good student representation. We made sure that we engaged parents, guardians, and caregivers. So there were different parent representatives on the community consultation, ensured that we also had representation from our diocese. So we really wanted to make sure we had that sort of triangle of connection between home, school, and parish when we were looking at developing the protocol. The other partnership we established was, or the other guiding principle was that we have multi-sector relationships because there are lots of community organizations that serve members of our community that have experiences with human trafficking that we don't have, or with sex trafficking now that we don't have, and we need to bring that lens and voice to the development of the protocol. We wanted to make sure that we promote equitable and culturally safe responses, so we made sure we reached out to various communities within Halton. We wanted to make sure that we respected confidentiality, privacy, and informed consent, and ensured that our interventions were safe. We didn't want our protocol to re-traumatize people for having people to retell their story or re-victimize. We wanted to make sure that it was supportive and victim-centered. Go to the next slide. So we held 2 virtual community consultations. This was kind of during COVID, so unfortunately we weren't able to do a lot of it in person. And we used the International Institute of Restorative Practices listening circle process. So that was to try and create a sense of safety and build community for all of the participants. It was a very prescribed process where questions were provided ahead of time that people could reflect on and then bring their answers to the consultation. So it was facilitated by representatives from each of the school boards and included student representation from the various boards. I believe you looked after the student facilitating the student group with one of our social workers. So we had a wide variety of participation from the community. Next slide, please. So from those 2 sessions, we took the feedback from our community members, our students, our parents, to try and put a protocol together and a procedure together that would support would support prevention, would support education, and appropriate intervention for students. Out of that protocol, we developed training in partnership with Stavis of Halton, and it was available to staff as of this past September, so to September 2023. And it's an expectation that all HCDSB teaching and support staff complete the module. So far at this point, approximately 80% of HCDSB school staff have completed the online training. And we also, in partnership with One Child, have been working on education for students in grade 8 to 10 in their religion classes, because we know that our staff need to be educated, our students need to be educated, as well as our parents in our community. So making sure that everyone is on the same page to recognize the signs and symptoms in terms of prevention and education.
If I can just interject, Amanda, for a moment. One of the challenges when we say 80%, obviously we want to get to the 100% number, but one of the challenges is the constant flow of new staff, new supply teachers, new EAs, staff who've moved on to different roles in life outside HCDSB, and new staff coming in. So what happens is that every month, anyone who's new to the system as an employee of the board, whether it be at a school or here at the board office, you will get a notification to complete this training. It's about an hour long, and it's a requirement for you to have done before the conclusion of the school year. Okay, so it's an ongoing process. It's not something that started in September and ended by October, but it's a process that continues throughout the school year, and it will continue into future school years because we have new hires all the time. Sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
Next slide, please. In terms of student education, so grades 7 to 10 have been receiving in-servicing from One Child in all religion classes. This is to make sure that we're targeting that 12 to 14 age group that are especially susceptible to being targeted by traffickers.
Yeah, so room, or they've had presentations directly from One Child streamed in through Microsoft Teams to classes and to various schools at any one point in time. Last year we focused on grades 9 and 10, and then this year we've put an additional focus on our elementary school students. And our hope is that if we could target various age groups and then go back to them 2 years later There, we will capture these same students as a refresher, as an update on a regular basis. To give the same students the same presentation each year really doesn't make sense. But the conversations and the dialogue and the information as a resource should still be discussed within those classrooms. And we've targeted our religion and social justice classes, both at the elementary and at the secondary panel.
Staffis has also made themselves available to Catholic school councils as well. The school I was at last year, we brought them into one of our Catholic school council meetings to present to parents, because a lot of the information I think was new to a lot of parents that are there. So we're trying to engage in education and prevention on multiple fronts to make sure that the messaging, it's not just a one and done, the training is done, but it's consistent and it's revisited. Go to the next slide, please. In terms of staff responsibilities, as we mentioned, it's an expectation of all HCDSB staff to complete the module, either when they're hired or, in their role currently. Our biggest concern when a disclosure is made or it's human sex trafficking is suspected is that we're keeping the students safe. We're being transparent in terms of what our procedure is. We're explaining our role and letting them know that we do have a duty to report. All staff members within our board have a duty to report, and that's to CAS. We're taking, as much as possible, we're listening without judgment, focusing on the student and centering the student voice. We're trying to make sure that we're avoiding projecting any judgment or our own biases, and letting the student take the lead. So we want to make sure that we're not leading the conversation. We're not probing for their story, because in many cases they're going to have to connect with, the police, and we don't want them to have to be re-traumatized as they tell their story over and over. We really want to assure students that safety is their priority and that we have a team of people that are here to support them.
Thank you. So next slide, please. Okay, so as a school board, all employees at the board have a duty to report to the Children's Aid Society if they believe a child is at risk of sexual abuse, has been sexually abused, or if there is sexual exploitation that has occurred. So all staff actually are trained every year by their administrators at the beginning of the school year at staff meetings. They go through duty to report. And so this is one piece of duty to report. We are obliged to call the society if we are concerned about sex trafficking regarding a student under the age of 18 years. And you'll see a list there of relevant legislation, government legislation, as well as HCDSB policy or protocols that are relevant to duty to report. Next slide, please. Okay, so schools are important partners in combating child sexual exploitation, and staff are really important partners in identifying, responding to, and preventing sex trafficking. And that includes connecting students and families, guardians to resources as needed. So there's a lot of really good work that occurs in our schools regarding education on prevention and promotion of healthy relationships. And that's a key piece to the story in terms of what is a healthy relationship, what's an unhealthy relationship look like, helping students understand that and notice that. We also ask staff to really be aware of the students in their classroom and their baseline, sort of behavior and presentation. Teachers know their kids well in the classroom. And so if they're concerned about a student who's presenting with some sort of change, we ask that they let somebody in the school know. So whether that's the administrator, well, speak to the student, of course, first to see, what's happening, if there's anything the student wants to talk about, but also connecting with parents, administrator, and any school supports that are appropriate to help the student. And they might not necessarily think it's regarding sex trafficking, but it could be just, mental health. It could be anxiety, depression, anything that they might notice that would be a change off baseline. We encourage them to speak to students, parents, and administrators as a first step, really, in noticing anything that we maybe need to be aware of. And then caring adults in our schools, when you see the list of people here, really set the tone for the school in terms of engagement and students feeling like they belong. And that's also really important for students to feel like they have somewhere to go and somewhere to be. If they they need to speak to somebody. So, we're really thankful that our staff work really hard to set that tone in the school and create that environment where kids feel welcome and safe to speak to somebody as needed. Next slide, please. So I am a school social worker. I've been a school social worker for a long time now. I won't say quite how long. And I'm proud to say that all of our high schools have a social worker embedded within that school. All our elementary schools have a social worker that is assigned to them. So there is support within the schools, and we offer support for a wide range of issues, including anti-sex trafficking. And we use our tiered model of intervention to really look at the support that is offered and where and how we do that. So when we have a situation where we are told that sex trafficking is something that is a concern for the school or a student has come forward, social work can be really instrumental in terms of those therapeutic conversations that need to happen with the student, with the parents or guardian, with supporting the school in terms of therapeutic intervention. So how do we go through this protocol in a way that's really sensitive to a student's needs? Bearing in mind things like, past trauma or experiences. As Amanda talked about, we don't want to re-traumatize by asking kids to continually talk about the same thing, but how do we get that information? We would do direct counseling and support for students and their families and guardians, but we are looking to make referrals to the community for that ongoing support. Sometimes, unfortunately, that takes a little while to get that support in place. So the school social workers are there to support while we're waiting for those community resources to come online. And we're always, being careful to ensure that we're getting the most appropriate support. So culturally relevant and responsive support is what we're looking for every student and family. We also support around just the safety piece. So, accessing, if there's a safety plan that needs to be put into place, we can support around that with our community partners as well. Next slide, please. So this slide has an overview of risk factors that we need to be aware of. And of course, just because you see something up there doesn't mean any child that experiences that issue is at risk of, is engaged, has been abused in the way of sex trafficking. But what we do know is that sometimes kids who unfortunately have been lured into sex trafficking, we might see some of these risk factors present for them. So it's just something for us to be cognizant of. But next slide, Andrea. As we think about risk factors, we also like to think about support, prevention, and enhancing protective factors, right? So that's the other side of the story, is how can we enhance those protective factors and really reduce those vulnerabilities where possible. So examples are providing consistency in routines, expectations at school. So kids knowing what to expect from the adults in their lives within the schools, within our schools. Teaching about healthy relationships, including consent and boundaries. So, helping kids find their voice and knowing about being able to say no and boundaries and what's okay and what's not okay. Because as Anthony had talked about, sometimes it's family members or extended family, right? So really working with kids around those pieces. Teaching students how to identify, develop, and maintain healthy relationships. So what does trust look like? What happens when someone breaks your trust? How do we reestablish trust? All those kinds of things that really are protective factors because we're giving kids information about how relationships should look and healthy relationships. We've worked with staff so that they're understanding students in their classes may have experienced past or may be currently in a traumatic situation, right? So what that can look like in terms of how students present in the classroom, because sometimes those presentations are behavioral, and what we know is that there can be other things, of course, that are impacting how they're presenting in our classrooms, including, mental health pieces like anxiety, depression, or it could be situational. And teaching students about luring, online luring, and how to protect themselves. So these are some of the protective factors that we look at and think about. Next slide, please, Andrea. And here's some resources that we share with our staffing community. in terms of where they can get more information. And so we, as you can see, have a number of protocols and procedures that are in place to support staff, to support students. And I think that is the last slide.
When we're talking about training and providing education for students and staff, when we're talking about staff, we're not just talking about staff at schools and staff in the classroom. We're talking about secretaries, both here at the board office and at the schools. We're talking about custodians. We're talking about senior administrators. We're even talking about the director of education. Everyone has a responsibility. It's a societal issue. Everyone has either a child or a niece or a nephew or a granddaughter or grandson or whomever it may be. So the more we're informed, the better we can make ourselves available for those who are being victimized, the more we can be able to identify what is happening around us, because sex trafficking isn't necessarily always seen at the school. Sometimes it's down the street. Sometimes it's on the other end of the building. Sometimes it's at the grocery store. Sometimes it's when you're traveling and you're at a nice hotel and you're wondering what's going on down here for, 4 corridors away from me. So we've really taken a concentrated or purposeful way of thinking that we should be educating and training everyone, even if 1,000 additional people are trained and only one incident is identified. That's that one incident matters. That one child matters. So that's the approach we've taken. I remember early on when we made the mandate that all employees of the HCDSB complete this. Someone asked, "Well, I'm not at a school. What? Why would I need to do this?" And then the feedback that we've received has been very positive, and some have said, "Well, I've been really enlightened, and having gone through the training has really helped me to understand what's happening in our schools, but just what's happening in our communities at large." If there are any questions, happy to answer them. I know Amanda and Jane have a ton of expertise.
Yes, please.
Jerry.
Thank you, first of all, very much for coming and speaking to us today. And yeah, I think as Nancy kind of indicated earlier, that just raising everyone's awareness about the issue and its prevalence in Halton, is very important, clearly. And to that end, just curious, what has been done so far and was, I guess, upcoming for education of our parents around this?
Yeah, good question, Jerry. So we invited many parents and parent groups to be part of our conversations that we had in the development of the protocol. We had focus groups and so forth. We also had last spring, we had 2 separate presentations to parents on 2 different nights, I think 3 weeks apart. In case parents can attend one, they could attend the other. That was delivered through curriculum services through Patricia Delben and One Child. The plan is to do that again this year. Certainly when a date or dates are established, I could share that with Nancy to share with yourselves. And any of you want to engage in that or participate as a viewer or whatever, we certainly welcome that. Obviously, there's also communications to home when curriculum is being delivered in a classroom, given the sensitivity of the topic. Resources, whether it be human or materials, are always made accessible at the school level for school administrators to provide to families, either through guidance, through the main office, or through the classroom teacher themselves.
Thank you again for the presentation. For someone that has a young child in the demographics that you talked about, what online prevention stuff that sources do you have to avoid stuff like this happening?
Jane, maybe, I don't know if you, I can tell you there's a number of resources that we have, right, that are at fingertips to guidance counselors, to teachers, to administrators, to our social workers. There's a lot of lived experience and expertise in the field. Obviously, the governance of social media and how students sometimes use use social media in ways that concern. I can tell you, I had a particular concern today at St. Thomas Aquinas, one of my schools, in terms of the behaviors of some. But all we can do is continue to educate, try to get students to understand that decision making they engage in has an impact. And what starts off in your mind as a joke or in your circle of friends as a joke is not a joke. Where there's impact, doesn't matter what your intent is, it's the impact involved. And so we continue to try to chip away at these adolescents, immature behaviors, but most importantly, the evidence and the data shows the true perpetrators aren't youth against other youth. They're adults, and they're adults in our families. Vast majority of cases are adults who are very familiar to the parents of that victim.
So is there any tracking device that parents can use to monitor their kids' stuff?
You know what? Build relationships of trust, open the conversation. Sometimes, and I can speak to that in my own personal experience, if I may have two daughters myself. Sometimes you may not want to hear what your daughter is sharing with you, but you got to be a caring and active and loving parent, and that means being open to stories that you don't want to hear of their own lived experience, but you have to be there to listen to it. And you got to know who you should be connecting your children with so that they have positive influences and they can always feel safe to share, right? As soon as those doors are closed, that's where problems happen. Right? How was your day today? Well, that's not enough. Engage in your child's education, engage in their life, not just in school, but after school. And the more engagement, the more open communication, the more honesty, the more the hidden truth comes to the fore.
I'm just circling back to Ada's question. Is there resources online for parents on our website, like on the Halton Catholic? Okay.
HCDSB sex trafficking protocol. If you Google that, the protocol will come up, and all of the resources are listed there as well as like definitions and kind of the signs and things to look out for.
Great. It's a great resource for parents. Thank you.
Sorry, I just have one over here. I'm just interested in, as far as transitioning in terms of disclosure, what's the support of the board for a child who's disclosed or a peer that wishes to help when it moves to CAS or the police? Just because I find that I have a daughter, and I think that there seems to be sometimes a reluctance because the board, I think the position of what I see is that the kids see the board supportive, but where does it go from there? And where does the board stop in terms of the care? And it goes to someone else, and there may be a fear of disclosure because of the unknown. I'm just wondering where that goes.
What we do is we work with students to really get them to a point where they understand our responsibilities in terms of needing to report and why we need to report to the society as well as the police. Because sometimes a student may come to us and it's been past experiences that they've had, and they'll say, but it's not happening anymore. But we still need to notify police and CAS so that, heaven forbid, if this person is targeting somebody else. And so honestly, it can be tough work, right? In terms of, because we can't make promises. I can't make a promise about how the CAS is going to handle a situation. And I can encourage and work with the CAS to talk about what a student's fears are, like this child might be upset because they're worried about how their friend's going to react, or they're worried about how the parent is going to react. And we absolutely have those conversations with the society to say, like, what can we do to protect this child who's disclosing to us? And, you know, often we can, we don't have to give the name of the child who's disclosed if it's not the child in the situation. When the child is in the situation, you know, sometimes honestly, the social worker will sit for a couple of hours with the student and really just sort of work through it and take breaks and, you know, come back to the conversation and talk about something, you know, maybe off to the side a little bit, but we do come back to the topic at hand. Um, when we meet with kids, initially social workers always do informed consent, and we talk about, like, if there's risk to a student, if they talk about a risk to themselves or somebody else, we have to notify and get help for them, right? So we kind of circle back to that. We talk about what that means and we try to work through it with the student. Um, the bigger issue can often be like telling the parent. The child doesn't want their parent to know what they've disclosed to us, right? And again, it's a matter of working through the situation. If there's a safety concern involved, if we're concerned that the child may be at risk from the parent because we're telling the parent, then that's a CAS matter in itself. But of course, parents need to be aware of what their child has experienced or is experiencing, and we collaborate with the family, to the guardians or the parents, to look at how can we support everybody, because everybody's going to be very upset in this kind of situation. It's very obviously distressing for everybody involved. So really, you know, not shying away from that emotionality, like that's a normal response, but reassuring as much as we can, in terms of, you know, how can we make this process go as well as we can, without making promises about how the end result will exactly look.
And the other thing I just wanted to mention is that once that disclosure is made, that doesn't mean that's the end. The support continues afterwards. So whether that's in terms of a child and youth counselor or continued work with the social worker, especially if they've built that connection through that sort of particularly traumatic event, it's an ongoing support.
All right, terrific. Okay, we'll do one more, if that's okay. Yeah, just for the sake of time, guys. Thanks. Go ahead, Kevin.
Sorry, I got a long question. I got 3 questions. Sorry. You mentioned I mean, the numbers are staggering there for Indigenous communities, and especially racialized folks. I'm curious to understand what that feedback was from Indigenous communities and how the school can actually support them. It's 3 questions. Just hang on, 2 more. And you also mentioned targeted approach to those communities that are vulnerable. I also want to try and understand exactly what that looks like from a school, from the school perspective. And we also went through the legislation that's already in place to prevent sex trafficking. Now, with the training, and I think the training is going to be really good for staff, how confident are you this will be addressing despite the legislation that's already in place? And like, where are we falling through the cracks, given the fact that we have quite a bit of legislation that's already there? How is this anti-trafficking protocol that's being implemented now? Are there going to be any measures put in place to see how effective this turns out to be in the future?
Excellent questions. Amanda, are you comfortable with the first one around?
I am, and I think it goes back to the partnerships that we've created with the community. I'm just pulling up the sex trafficking protocol just because you mentioned Indigenous communities in particular. We work very closely with our Indigenous education lead, Sherry Sable, because she has a lot of connections. Sorry, I just lost the chart here. To the Indigenous community. So we had representation from Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We had, I'm looking for any other, we had Punjabi Community Health Center, we had Halton Black Voices to try and make sure that we're getting voice and input from the community, because those are the community organizations that are directly supporting individuals that are affected, and they can do it from a culturally relevant and responsive lens. So that was the main approach in supporting those communities in particular, and also being open and honest that because of, you know, systemic discrimination, that those communities are disproportionately impacted through no fault of their own, but because of the systems that are in place. So being open and recognizing that, and then trying to work with the communities directly to provide that support.
If I can just add on to that, because I haven't kept track of all the questions separately, so I'll just, hop in and you can let me know if I've missed something. But I'm just thinking about in terms of the Indigenous support piece. There is Jordan's principle, which is out there, which does ensure that Indigenous children have rights and access to supports that they need. So, for example, one of our social workers is currently working through our Indigenous consultant, Sherry Sayville, who has connected us with an elder, and we're getting support for a student who we're transporting with the support of the parent up to Heritage Park to meet with an elder, not around sex trafficking, but just to get support around the issue that they need some support with. So we do access that through Jordan's principle to ensure that we do have that funding that is there, the government has ensured is there, actually does go where it needs to go. Sorry, I was making some notes. So there's that feedback part. We also, when we were looking at that, and we talk about community consultation, we talk about communities that are more at risk. What that actually translates in my mind to, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is the idea that like colonization has impacted our Indigenous partners, our different communities in terms of how they are treated by, the justice system, the welfare system, the education system, and really being cognizant of that and how that impacts somebody's ability to come forward and talk to us about what they've experienced and what they have, what they've gone through, whether that be sex trafficking or something else. So part of that education piece is for staff to understand that it's a bigger piece, like there's a whole undercurrent for our racialized community, for our Indigenous communities and our Black communities in terms of how they would maybe feel about getting the supports from us at the school, and what supports can we get into place to support them, such as an elder from our Indigenous community, or our Roots, which is a organization that supports racialized children. So it's kind of understanding the big picture and how that translates down into how people feel about accessing support and coming forward and getting that help. That kind of.
I think so. And from a monitoring perspective for a review, so you may or may not be aware, our board policies are reviewed on a 3-year cycle. When it comes to safe school protocols, whether a police school board protocol or a violent threat risk assessment or anti-sex trafficking, we will meet with the other school boards, so the other 3, sometimes with police services, sometimes with the community partners, on a 2-year basis. So last year we implemented the protocol in February of 2022. So next year will be a review year to look at the things that are working, the things that are not working, what kinds of resources can we put that are new, that either came from the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Health or the Attorney General's office. How are we working together as school boards? And the various stakeholders within our school board. Are we doing enough parent engagement? Are we doing enough in terms of student education? What grades and what particular groups are we being purposeful in delivering that curriculum? So I can tell you that strategically, just reviewing last year, we really focused on 9 and 10. And we did a little bit of work with students in grade 12, particularly as we got closer to graduation and felt some of the areas around consent and boundaries were in a piece that we can weave into the conversation about anti-sex trafficking. This year, we made a concerted effort, given the headlines, given a number of incidents that have been reported to police services, to focus on our elementary school students. Now, I did bring this to senior admin, and we had a conversation, because you got to think about age appropriateness, parents, what parents are comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with. So I think we're taking a lot of good steps, but again, I don't want to be, and I don't think anyone here wants to be members of the Halton exceptionalism club. Like this happens, and it's happening in our neighborhoods. And if you look at some of the data around the prominence of sex trafficking in the Halton region, it's happening to students of families who are affluent and well-educated, but often disconnected with their children. We have to be mindful of that. So we're constantly in review, and I think that's an important piece. But if we could continue the conversations, it might be that in our conversations that emerge out of next year amongst the school boards and community partners, that we're going to have to do maybe a new round of consultation with parents and students and others and other stakeholders to see their perspective, because ours is one as school administrators, as leaders, as employees of the board, but we need to hear from the families directly.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you again, Anthony, Amanda, Jane. We all appreciate your time and terrific insight into this matter. So thank you. And we'll look forward to, I think, to seeing how CPIC can potentially play a role in supporting the education of parents in particular, and see how we can further improve the awareness out there. So thanks again.
Thanks, Jerry, Jen and company.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. Thanks, Nancy.
Yep. All right. Okay, we'll move right along to our next agenda item, our update from our trustee representative, Marvin.
Good evening, everyone. So we have had 3 board meetings since our last CPIC meeting, first meeting on Feb 21st, March 7th, and March 21st. I'll give you an update on what's happened at the board, and I'll try to stay within that. So at the Feb 21st board meeting, staff presented about the spring 2023 STEM updates for K to 8 and 9 to 12. And Superintendent Dinolfo talked about it. The events for spring 2023 were outlined and discussed at that board meeting, and we are doing extremely well in that area. Some of us have attended the STEAM showcase that we talked about. Very wonderful event, very engaging, and our students are performing extremely well. This week is Team Week at HCDSB, and there are a multitude of exciting and engaging events happening across our system. And since we are at CPIC, I would like to extend an invitation to all our parents in all the schools and communities to get involved in the STEAM activities in your local schools. At that same board meeting, there was an action item to revive the multi-year strategic planning process. We all know that we started it and stopped because of COVID. At this board meeting, the director was given the ability to use an RFP process to select a multi-year strategic planning coordinator. Accordingly, an RFP was initiated. We have now hired an external consultant, Maximum City by name, to facilitate the multi-year strategic planning process. You will hear a lot more about this process. You will get involved in this process, and we invite you to participate in this process. We are targeting completion of this process November, December of this year. The multi-year strategic planning committee will continue to meet monthly and get updates. And as we review the progress, we will give updates to CPIC. At this meeting, the school year calendar for 23-24 was approved. And at the same meeting, policy I-06 delegation to the board was discussed, debated, and approved. It was requested that staff write a procedure to develop an online delegation request form. So a working committee was struck and a procedure was created and presented at the policy meeting of April 11th. An online submission form has been developed, which will be operational soon, which means if anybody wants to delegate to the board, you go online, submit your delegation online, will be received with the timestamp. There'll be total transparency and clarity on who can delegate and who cannot delegate. So it's going to be up soon. There are some small kinks being worked out, but it's coming soon. At the March 7th board meeting, there was a staff presentation to the board on the equity and inclusive education, anti-racism and anti-discrimination professional development presentation, which was given to staff. The report focused on the objectives of the PADA, with a connection to Catholic education, learning outcomes and participation levels, and feedback from participants. That same meeting, there was the staff report, which presented the results of the parent survey held to determine interest in offering specialized arts and science programs, which we talked about and looking for a volunteer for that. A committee is struck, and we are looking for volunteers, as Superintendent Dinolfo said. And the outcomes are surely going to be very exciting for our students, great opportunity for our students. So I'm looking forward to hear the outcomes of that committee. At that same meeting, the appointment of Three new student trustees were presented. We have 2 new student trustees and 1 returning student trustee. At the March 21st board meeting, there was a presentation by staff from our Thomas Merton Welcome Centers. We have the centers in Oakville and Milton, and they do amazing work. Some stats for the 21-22 years, we have had 1,400 new clients passing through these centers and 6,000 plus returning clients. So this centers that we have, welcome centers, help a lot of our newcomers to the country, refugees and people needing support. So they're doing very well. At the same meeting, there was an action item entitled Potential Enhancement to Reduce Risk Management. And this asked for a report to be brought to the board indicating any potential enhancements to our risk management system for our elementary schools and their corresponding cost evaluation. This report is due to be brought back to the board on May 2nd, and this motion passed. And at the same meeting, a summary of results from the identity-based student census was provided. We now have a better understanding of the students that we serve based on the data that we have and the staff too. And staff will be sharing this information and results with departments as needed to support planning and training and targeted supports to our various groups that we have. This is ongoing work and further updates will be forthcoming. Besides the board work that happens, trustees continue to visit schools across all municipalities. Trustees from all regions are invited to visit schools in all different regions, and that's continuing. There is a Friends and Advocate of Catholic Education FACE, FACE. That's an initiative which is presently being worked on, where local MPPs are being invited into our schools to see the good work that we do, and that's ongoing. Next week, trustees will be attending the OCSTA AGM, and this is in Toronto. And finally, some news today, the ministry has announced the GSN and some big plans in the being proposed for better schools and student outcomes. We are awaiting details, and there's lots of numbers to be crunched and lots more details we are looking for. And we look forward to the outcome of the announcements where it concerns accountability and transparency, effective governance, maximizing capital assets, and strengthening teacher oversight, and consistent information and approach to student learning. So these are a few things coming up at the board. We will be discussing a little more about this. And that's my report, and happy to answer any questions.
All right. Well, Marvin, once again, it seems you were very thorough. Thank you for the updates. Terrific. Clearly lots going on. All right. Moving right along. Denise, WAPC update, please.
Thank you. So on March 27th, the Halton reps for WAPC had a combined meeting with a number of reps from across the region. It was, there was a special guest speaker, Anthony Parada, who did a presentation when Faith Meets Movies. He's a very interesting speaker. And also there was a provincial update for the reps that attended as part of a consultation with ICE on the Fully Alive program. So there was an information update to those reps on what's going on with Fully Alive from the ICE perspective. And they were asked, I believe the feedback form just went out to all WAPC reps that attended on that particular meeting. As mentioned, I think I've mentioned many meetings that OAPC is in consultation with the ministry on a variety of topics. And over the course of the last, I think, month, March and April, I know they had one today. The executive director had a meeting with the ministry today. In just to sort of keeping the OAPC and the parents' voice of engagement and advocacy very loud and clear in terms of the ministry. So one of the things that was shared in March with the with those meetings was the feedback that OAPC had received from a survey that had been put to parents, I believe, last year. And one of the topics that came up was the push for the return of a grade 13 or an OAC year. So that's something that has become quite loud and clear from the parents from the survey that we received, and that was communicated to the minister and the Ministry of Education. And I know that we've received feedback about what the plans that have been just sort of talked about today in terms of the what's been revealed by the ministry. So OAPSI has been asked to give the feedback. So that will be happening, I believe, in May at a board of directors meeting. We'll be doing that. And this weekend is a very big weekend for OAPSI because it's the conference and the AGM. So I will be heading to Kingston. That's where Kingston is hosting this year as a return, I think, of Algonquin Lakeshore to the OAPSI family. So they're very excited up there. And I know their parents are because they've been a really big presence, interestingly enough, for the travel that they've done for many of the conferences that have happened, in the southern part of Ontario. And so I'm looking forward to it at the masses at one of the oldest churches up there, and the AGM and the conference, that's one of their schools. So I know there's a few Halton parents that are brave enough to drive to Kingston for that particular conference. But I'm really looking forward to it. And again, as mentioned about the ICE symposium, OAPSI will be there as part of the board of directors, and I myself will be there as well. That's it for me.
All right, terrific. Thanks, Denise. Any questions for Denise on OAPSI going on? No. Okay. Well, enjoy the conference and enjoy Kingston. What a beautiful place to have it. It's great.
Homecoming, went to Teachers College there.
Ah, there you go. Nice. Old stomping ground. Nice. All right, great. Thanks again, Denise. Okay, moving on to our CPIC subcommittee updates. I know Kaylee was going to give the update for the School Council Support Committee. She had provided some notes, but did someone else have it to speak to? You have it, Jill?
Maybe that was for something else.
I think it was for something.
Oh, I'm sure you're right. It's for a board something, not for CPIC. You're right. Sorry, Jill.
That's okay.
Sure.
So we had our first ever Let's Connect session for chairs and co-chairs on March 8th. It was an hour-long session, drop-in format. The hour flew by with continuous discussion and conversation. There were some main themes that sort of came out of that session. Things like how to increase parent engagement, how to recruit new members to council, and how to really build or strengthen a sense of community within our schools. So there was lots of great ideas shared. The feedback was positive from those who attended. Overall, I think it was successful as a pilot. So I think as a subcommittee, we're thinking that because we have a Council of Chairs in May, we're thinking that perhaps we don't host another one before the end of the year, but we start fresh at the beginning of the year once the new councils are formed in September, with maybe alternating between Council of Chairs on the off months when we don't meet. We could perhaps hold these Let's Connect sessions. That's all I have. Any questions?
Questions for Janelle or the committee? That's great. I'm sorry I couldn't attend that one. That sounds like it went off terrific. Yeah, look forward to seeing them relaunch in the fall. It's great. Okay, moving on then to our parent community engagement subcommittee.
Okay, so since our last meeting, we've held our Lenten session on March the 2nd with led by Patricia Dalben and Jillian, which was, I think, Andrew, I don't know if you recall, because it was about a month and a half ago now, about 40 or 50 people online, and then it's available for a replay on our website. We also had Chris Vollum speak last week on social media safety. It was very well attended. We had about 110 parents show up to that session. And we are working right now on the Volunteer of the Year Awards. So the nominations are in, and we are meeting as a subcommittee next week to narrow down the list of candidates, which we will bring forth to you the week of May the 1st. And then we will vote on it as a committee at our meeting on May the 8th. So that's it.
All right, great. Thanks, Jen. Any questions for Jen or the committee?
Jen, did you get a lot of nominees?
I actually haven't been through them all. Andrew, do you remember the count on this? Yeah, 40, 50, 60, something like that. Yeah, some more from certain families of schools than others, but yeah, I think we ended up getting some from every family of schools. So that was good.
Terrific. All right, great. Thanks, Jen. And next up, social media committee. Lauren's away tonight, but Christy has her update.
Okay. Since the last meeting, posts have been around the Parent Volunteer Awards, the open CPIC seats, and the Chris Ballum social media session. On Twitter, we currently have 723 followers, up 5 from last month. Posts are still doing well when retweeted by the main HCDSB account. Our top tweet is about the Parent Volunteer Awards with 8,300 impressions or views, but still only 0.7% engagement. So according to Lauren, that's low. Generally speaking, Twitter engagement has been dropping over the past few months, and we blame Elon Musk for that. That's our hypothesis anyway. Facebook, we still only have 329 followers, so we're up 3 in the last month-ish. Engagement also remains low, but page engagement generally on Facebook tends to not be great. Our main HCDSB account has similar engagement ratio for Facebook versus Twitter. And in terms of our future plans, we are going to launch a CPIC Instagram account next week when Lauren is back from her holiday. More engagement seems to be migrating to Instagram from Twitter. So Amanda Bartucci from Strategic Communications is going to help get an account set up, and we'll see how that goes. And if you don't already follow our accounts, please do so. And more importantly, please share posts when we put them up to help with visibility. That's all that I have from Lauren.
Great, thanks, Christy. Any questions about social media? All right, yeah, we can continue to chip away. I mean, I gotta give Lauren a ton of credit. Like the great posts you see, that's her creativity. I mean, Christy and I, we chip in with some of the editorial stuff, the wording and whatnot. But yeah, I know Lauren's done an amazing job of raising our profile. The numbers don't sound impressive, but they're coming along, and Instagram, I think will also help again propel us a bit, because that's what tends to be where more people are now. So look forward to that. Okay, so moving on to our board committee updates. Anything on mental health, Jen?
Yes, we had a meeting on March the 22nd. I'll just give a few little highlights from the meeting. We talked about the role of SMHO, which is Student Mental Health Ontario, and the support that it provides around student mental health and well-being. And we talked about the Mental Health Advisory Committee's priorities for the year, which are student engagement and involvement, mental health literacy, and inclusive mental health resources. We talked a bit about mental health literacy at secondary and elementary levels and some of the initiatives there, as well as the Mental Health Student Champions, which was an initiative rolled out this fall to give voice to student experience. And I believe that's being rolled out at the secondary level. And that's it. We have one more meeting this year on June the 7th.
Great, thanks, Jen. Okay, bullying prevention. I do have something to share from Kaylee. That was the update I was referring to. Okay, so the committee met on March 9th with a focus on looking at HCDSB's long-term plan for bullying prevention. The committee's next steps are to look at how we can change HCDSB's online messaging around bullying. This includes expanding the resources available for students, staff, and families, making the landing page more visible and easier to find, strengthening the board's messaging around zero tolerance for bullying, and looking at the feasibility of developing a bullying reporting tool similar to other school boards, separate from the hate incident reporting tool that is already in place. The committee's next meeting is next week, April 26th. In addition, trustees Trish Powell and Chris Saunders have joined the committee as trustee representatives alongside founding trustee Brenda Agnew. So this is the update from the anti-bullying committee. don't ask any questions because. All right. Journeying with Jesus, Ada.
Okay, before I start, I'm gonna make a note about Journeying with Jesus. When the meetings are usually held, like, I think around 3 o'clock. And I was told that, I guess I'm the only non-teacher or administrator on the team. So it's hard, like I can't make decisions or I can't say anything because they're already in the school. So what they do is that they send me information. So I'm going to share the information with you guys. I think Nancy had mentioned some of it already. But Nancy, is there anything I should do by not being like, why would they not let me go in? Yes. Yes. Yes, yes. Okay. Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 Okay. All right. No problem. So as we know, the Journey with Jesus event will be during the Catholic Education Week. I think you mentioned that, which is on Thursday, May 4th, 2023. And all the information should be provided to all the schools by April 25th. And there'll be a reflection station readings that can be used during the Journey with Jesus event on May 4th. And there are 2 action items. They said every school is encouraged to form a Journey with Jesus leadership team of students that can help lead the event, as they had done last year. Leadership students in the past have led school activities during the Catholic Education Week, and leadership teams can lead the reflection stations at the school. And then the last action item they need is the faith animators at each school should connect with the secondary school chaplain in the family of schools in order to establish a connection between the elementary and the secondary. So that's all.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thanks, Ada. Okay. Next up, homeschool parish partnership. Cherish.
Nothing to report at this time.
Okay.
We haven't met.
All right. Thank you. Focus on faith, Christine. Nothing. Okay. Likewise for strategic plan. And finally, school year calendar, Janelle.
Yeah, so I think we're still in a holding pattern, right, Nancy? We've got approval from the ministry.
No, we haven't received approval from the ministry, but we know the calendar is,
It's out.
it's out there, yeah.
Just their final stamp hasn't been.
And we just received the topics for the 3 PA days that the ministry has directed us to. So we're just ironing that out as a senior staff so that we'll have the topics all laid out. Documentation.
Okay. All right. Thank you one and all for the updates. All right. So a couple of discussion items. First off, the our CPIC Council of Chair dates for 23-24. These are included with the package. Yeah. Okay. With the minutes. So yeah, so they're laid out there. What really do we need to discuss on these, actually?
I think it's just to make
I think
aware of the.
more for info
Yeah,
than
and if there's
discussion.
any issues anyone foresees with those dates. I mean, we make
Yeah.
sure that they avoided.
Conflicts with other committee meetings and obviously.
So the thing is, because I think it's one of the board committees, CPIC, so we have to remember we have policy committee meetings on the alternating Tuesday, and we have CAC meetings. So that's why we have put our dates in the calendar. So just if you can bring any feedback to Jen and Jerry, because then we have to go back before other dates start to go on to them. We want to make sure the board committee dates are set. Okay.
Yeah, so I suppose if we realize we've got a major conflict on any of these given dates, then perhaps we would look to move it. Otherwise, so yeah, Denise.
Sorry, so are they going to be in person? Or are you still moving to the weather and Clement teams type of thing?
In person.
They're in person.
In person will be the standard. And then, yeah, we'll take the weather and other factors into account as we approach.
And just with regards to the council chairs, so we even have the council chairs date, but what we've done for February, because we're going to continue that as a virtual meeting, because that's always impacted by weather. But we have an alternate date in the event we have a system closure like we did this year. So it's the week later. So you'll see that if you look at the calendar, it's clearly laid out so everybody knows.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Thanks, Nancy. Okay. Any questions on our dates for next year? Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. So upcoming and final council of chairs for the school year, May 25th at Lumen Christie. So here's what we have so far for our agenda. We thought it'd be great if each subcommittee of at our table could provide a summary of what we've accomplished this year. I think it's important that we share that and you know, remind the council of chairs of all the things we're endeavoring to do for the betterment of our children's Catholic education and the parent experience as well. So we'll ask each of the subcommittees to, and it doesn't have to be exhaustive. We're talking, I don't know, perhaps about a 5 minutes sharing of, you know, and perhaps, you know, one slide each of the highlights from the year as to what each subcommittee and then us, of course, as the larger committee have done this year on behalf of our stakeholders. Any thoughts on that from anybody?
Sorry, Jerry.
Yeah.
So is this going to be us standing up and presenting it? Is it in
Yep.
slide format? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be the idea. So one representative from each of the committees to come up and just give an overview.
You want to set a date on that? Then we presume we want it.
Yeah. Yeah, we should. Yeah, even if it's just, you know, no slide creation required, we'll take the content and put it into a slide. Yeah, we'll keep it very straightforward. Yeah.
That I was just say that it's better if everybody presents on one slide deck, so that so not
Yeah,
going up and down.
it'll just flow.
Just a quick note, it is May 24th, Wednesday, May 24th. This is 25th on there, but it's
Oh.
24th.
Right, you are. So in order to get it worked into the slide deck, what would be reasonable? Week prior? Or should we shorten that up? Maybe can we say when's May 15th? Yeah. Okay. We'll Yeah, that's great. Oh, we have conflict with the ice symposium. Yeah. Get online and do it. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's just it's the night before, right? So, yeah, I'm sure we can do that. Okay. So yeah, we'll send a follow up email about that to remind the subcommittees to contribute their content. Okay. Okay. We also will have CETA from our Human Rights and Equity Department of the Board presenting to us. We have Project Search, CETAFX. Can you speak to this one, Nancy?
Sure. So Project Search is a special education program for employment opportunities for students who are identified with special needs. Students who are usually in our workplace placement. And so there's an opportunity for them to get placed within employment, have an actually co-op at that. And so that's what Project Search is about. They'll do a great presentation so that informs the community.
Terrific. Of course, we'll have identified our new CPIC members for the the upcoming term. So they'll be invited and introduced at the meeting as is custom. So just to share from last week, we had the mandatory information session here, and out of what was it, 26 originally that put their nominations in, we had 11 that actually attended the mandatory event. We had one regret ahead of time, and then one regret the night of or the next morning. And we didn't hear from the rest. So interesting. So yeah, so we have 11 nominees that I believe, Andrea, they all confirmed their nominations that night. Okay. Yeah, it was, I thought it was a good meeting. It was very frank in terms of what the expectations are for the committee, and what they can expect, not just our expectations of them, but what they can expect coming into the role. So some good dialogue, some good questions, and yeah, I think they went away feeling well informed. So it's good. Is there a question?
Yeah, Jerry, can you just remind us again, when is it coming, the nominees coming to our council for votes and the deadlines? Do you have that handy?
Nominations are supposed to be sent to council chair or / admin, because the principals are actually collating the results. April 19th I have on here, but Andrea, is that still on target this Wednesday? And then votes are due May the 5th.
Yeah, so the nominee names and their bios will go out to councils this week. Yep. Yeah. Right, so that'll be the introduction of our new members. And then finally we have our volunteer awards presentations, which will be terrific. Look forward to that. Yeah. Any sneak peek on what that's going to look like, Jen?
No, because I won't be there. No, we haven't decided yet. I'm sure we'll talk about that kind of stuff when we have our meeting on Monday.
Okay. All right. So that, I believe, now we don't have yet listed in here a networking type opportunity. Yeah. So what did we say our timing was looking like on this? Are we pretty much full up? Yeah.
I think we could do like start a bit earlier and do networking,
Yeah.
like we used to do. We used to say it started at 6:30.
Yes.
Networking was 6:37.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Because
Use that as like a summary of the year. From a council perspective, what support would you have liked to had? What would have been helpful in this position? Like things that we can then take back and use as our subcommittees next year to better serve our councils and our parents that we represent.
Yeah. Yeah, because one thing we consistently hear back from council chairs is that they really appreciate the opportunity to be able to interact with their peers. So we always want to make sure we incorporate an element of that. So yeah, the finalized agenda, we'll get that out obviously in due course. But any questions, comments, thoughts about our council chairs? All good? Okay. Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Any other business or future business that anyone would like to raise? Okay. Terrific. All right. All right. Bless you, Vince, first of all. And if you would now bless us with a closing prayer. All right. Thank you one and all for your participation and contributions, and have a great rest of the week. Meeting adjourned.